We are privileged to have with us Dr. Radhika Batra, President Founder at Every Infant Matters. A warm welcome to you, ma'am, from all of us at the JU fraternity.
So my story begins when I was very young. I was around 17 or 18 and I got unwell. I got unwell so much that I had fever, and I had fever for 2 months, and nobody could diagnose why there was a fever. And let me give you a little bit of a backstory. I come from a very privileged background. My parents are both doctors, and we have a lot of doctors in the family. We have access to all medical services in the world, and yet it took almost 2 months, and it took my parents running around from pillar to post to get their child diagnosed. And ultimately, I got diagnosed. My father sent my scans to 7 countries across the world, and one of the doctors who responded said that this is the disease that she has, and it's a disease which affects 1 in 1 million Asian women. So it was a very rare sort of ailment, and it took my parents all their energy to get me the treatment that they wanted. It was very draining for them, and I could see the helplessness on their faces. I could see the helplessness in their eyes. And this is let me reiterate that this is when I was from a very privileged background. Now fast forward to 10 years later, when I fully recovered, touch wood, and I joined my residency in pediatrics. And then I saw that same helplessness which I had seen on my parents' faces day in, day out, on the faces of the children who used to, come to our OPDs, who used to be unwell, who used to feel so helpless because they were not as privileged as I was. They were not able to pull so many connections. They didn't have the money to get so many tests done. They had to stand in long lines in public hospitals, and they would ultimately either succumb to their illnesses, or they would become irreversibly blind or disabled, waiting for treatment, waiting for interventions, and waiting for help, basically, and there was no one to help them. So this is what I saw when I joined my residency, and somehow it just affected me on a very personal level because of what I had been through, and I just felt like this is unfair because I got the help that I wanted and I needed, and that is why I am here today. I have this luxury of being alive, and I have this luxury of being a doctor, of being an MD in pediatrics. So why should I not do something to help these children who are not as lucky and who don't have this luxury, whose parents are not aware that these vaccinations that we advise are so important. Lack of these vaccinations can kill their child. The parents are uneducated. They don't know these things. So why should I not help these children? And that was the thought and the concept and the ideology behind Every Infant Matters, that no child should have to die or live a life of disability, misery, or irreversible blindness, specifically when it can be prevented. This is what the ideology behind Every Infant Matters was. So what are our projects? I've talked about preventing blindness, and we have a bunch of other projects as well going on at Every Infant Matters. One, of course, is giving vitamin A. The second is deworming children. So deworming and vitamin A essentially have a synergistic action, because if you give vitamin A and there are worms in a child's stomach, it's not going to get absorbed. So you have to give them both together. We have a holistic health program going on where we promote breastfeeding. We dispel harmful myths related to childhood. For instance, I told you Rimi's story, her parents believing that herbs are the way to go, and these witch doctors and sadhu babas are the way to go is not a one-off occurrence. I think a majority of the population living in rural areas and in urban slums believes, in these quackeries and these indigenous methods of treatment, which are very, very harmful for their child. And we are actively trying to discourage these practices. We promote hygiene and hand washing. We also distribute prenatal vitamins to pregnant women. This is a very important project that we're doing. And that's because 20 million children in the world are born with a lower birth weight than normal, which affects both their life in the immediate and the long run period, and also it reduces it depletes the mother's health, being pregnant again and again and not having the luxury of antenatal care. Other projects, of course, are promoting gender equality, preventing stigma and discrimination, and of course in the last 1 year we have focused a lot of our energy on COVID-19. I think if I start talking about my COVID relief, it'll take up another hour. But I'll just tell you about one very interesting project which involves a lot of college students and it involves a lot of youth, which we started just recently in the second wave, and that is called the COVID Task Force of Every Infant Matters. So basically, when the second wave hit, that was around, I would say, mid-April, slightly before, around 10th of April. I think that's when the second wave really peaked in Delhi, at least. And that's when both me and my grandparents and my mother got COVID-19. And I was just sitting in quarantine. And for my grandparents, I was just scrambling around, arranging remdesivir, arranging oxygen cylinder, this and that. And it was really affecting my mental health. It was really giving me so much just because nothing was available. Hospital beds were not available. When we reached the hospital, supplies were not available. So when I thought about these things again, like I said, I come from a privileged medical background, and yet I was struggling so much. And then I just realized that the normal people on the road and the people who don't have connections in the medical world would be suffering way too much. So then we started this task force. We started with 6 volunteers, and we now have 165 volunteers. And these volunteers are constantly connecting the people in need to verified leads for whatever they need. And so far, we have answered and assisted 12,000, almost 12,700 SOS calls for hospital beds, for ventilators, for plasma, for medications, for anything that people, food tiffins who are for people who are in quarantine, for anything that people may need. So we've answered around 12,700 calls, and this is like a 24/7 helpline and a support system for people who are suffering with COVID and with people who are suffering under this huge humanitarian crisis that has hit our country. Lack of oxygen. We've had calls at 3 a.m. for an oxygen cylinder. We've had calls at 4 a.m. for a 16-year-old girl with SpO2 of 40 needing a ventilator bed. And my volunteers are constantly connecting them to what they need, and so far they've had a very good success rate. That's good. So this is what we've been doing, and luckily it's in Delhi the situation is slightly better now, but now what's happened is it's gotten worse in the south and it's gotten worse in Goa and the northeast. So most of our SOS calls these days are from these areas. We're trying to help whoever we can, and if anybody wants to volunteer, wants to help us in verifying leads, please do get in touch. We're always looking for more people. But you have to be enthusiastic about it, and you have to be okay with the WhatsApp group buzzing 24/7. It just buzz, bajta rehta hai. It's like that. Organizations, there are a bunch of youth-led initiatives for the youth. One Young World is one. Then Global Peace Index Ambassadors is one. I was a part of both. And of course, Forbes Under 30, Diana Award, Ashoka Young Change Makers. It's just names I can think of on the top of my head. I could tell you guys a lot more if you give me some time to read about it. But there are lots of opportunities for people under 25. Lots and lots and lots. You just have to Google, and you can just write something like change making opportunities for under 25. You can just apply for any of them. If you want to volunteer with us, our doors are always welcome for any person who wishes to volunteer. So do reach out and do send me an email. We always encourage volunteers. And you can always find causes that you yourself are passionate about. Like some person might be passionate about climate change, some might be passionate about animal welfare. So you find an organization who's working for that cause, and you pick up a project with them. Everybody these days, all the non-profits I know, are very keen for volunteering.